Age of lost years. An immeasurable years ago the Creator, of unknown origin, created the universe. For the longest time, all the planes were conjoined into a singular concept of chaos. But as individual ideas began to form, the ideas that later became divinities, the outer planes were separated one by one from the singular concept of chaos. After an undefined period, the astral plane separated the inner elemental chaos from the outer planes. The first giant, a Titan god being, the All-Father Anum, sorted the elements of the elemental chaos, forming the elemental planes. Then by stabilizing the ethereal plane, he split matter from antimatter, and created the proto-material plane, the first world, Aeonia. Aeonia then created all the living things of the material plane. With his union with Aeonia, Anum birthed his giant sons and established the ordning, and the giants ruled the material plane. Aeonia also birthed the primordial dragons Bahamut and Tiamat of the first world. The latter created Sardia the gem dragon, and then the rest of the proto-dragons appeared on the material plane. After a period of relative peaceful coexistence, the dragons and the giants waged war for the material plane, and the dragons were victorious. Anum abandoned his giants and retreated in the outlands. The formed gods of the outer planes invaded Aeonia to populate it with their races, and the war shuttered the first world into the many worlds of the material plane. Sardia the gem dragon died with the first world. The first of the many born worlds is Proteonia. Age of harmony, from unknown years until 10,000 years before shuttering. The gods walked freely on the material plane, shaping it to their will and design. The creator races, progenitors of all the later races, appeared on land, sea, and sky. Archeria, the ancestors of Yuan-Ti, Noga, lizardfolk, and other serpentfolk and scalekind. Batrachia, the ancestors of the bullywugs, doppelgangers, Quitoa, and other amphibious, piscine, and shapeshifter races. Aviali, fathers of the Arakocra, Kenku, and other avian humanoids. Quendi, the ancestors of all the Fae including Cords, Pixies, Sprites, and other small woodland beings. In hidden corners, almost ape-like, the proto-humans appeared, their origins vastly unknown. The gods taught the people all their knowledge and civilizations grew. Advanced nations with unimaginable accomplishments spread throughout the realm. Age of ruin, 10,000 years until 8,000 years before shuttering. The formed civilizations clashed for dominance, each with the help of their chosen gods in the conflict known as the Elder Wars. Many gods and elemental powers mated with mortals, creating the Arsamars, Tieflings, and Genasi. The material plane is almost destroyed because of these wars, and the surviving population is less than 1%, mostly from hidden and primitive communities. The Council of the Gods decided to leave the material plane and stop interfering in such direct ways. Age of silence, from 8,000 years until 5,000 years before shuttering. The survivors gathered and gradually formed settlements, though the previous heights could not be reached and most of the lost knowledge was forgotten. Without their gods' help, the mortal races struggled to advance in the hostile environment. Death became more common with multiple causes. With the absence of gods, dragons, and giants, though still scarce, appeared more on the plane, and the first dragonborns and Goliaths followed them. Also, many creatures spread in the Underdark and/or entered from the far realm, and without the protection of their gods, members of other races were enslaved or mutated by them. The nations started uncovering relics and gods' remains of the previous era and proceeded to manipulate them to secure their survival. This ultimately led to the Relic Wars, a disaster that shook the material plane and annihilated entire nations. Age of Grace, from 5,000 years until 3,000 years before shuttering. The gods decided to allow the use of divine magic by mortals, to help them, without the terrible effects of their direct interference. This allowed the mortal races to achieve great things and prosper immensely, ending the drought of the previous age. The dwarfs shaped long ago by Moradin awoke under the mountains, and the gnomes were born from gems in magical caves. Metis granted some humans the power of transformation, and many animal folk and beast folk evolved from these lineages. The mortals started defying their gods with their new powers and stretched the weave, culminating in the assassination of gods and the ascension of newer divinities, in a period of instability known as the Descent. The turning point in this period was the sacrifice of an unnamed divinity that birthed two opposite gods, Corellon and Gruumsh. Corellon shaped the elves to their modern-day image, and Gruumsh corrupted some of them into the orcs. This power shift managed to end the wars, though the material plane was scarred from the conflicts. Age of Twilight. From 3,000 years until 0 years before Shuttering, the gods had decided to rescue the faithful that did not stand against their creators and shelter them in a pure, undying island called Avalon, visible upon the material plane, yet out of reach for anyone but the devout members of the Fey races. Many residents of Avalon chose to travel to the mortal lands and mingle among the established communities in the supercontinent of Gondara, bringing with them the light and power of divinity, even deciding to forego their blessed, sheltered origins for the free and untamed lands of the continent. The sage Teruvas used arcane magic for the first time in history. The shuttering occurred that tore the undying lands from the material plane and hid them behind the ethereal plane in the form of Feywild and Shadowfell. The Goblinods appeared for the first time in recorded history and crossed the border to the material plane. The disturbed ley lines split the continent into smaller parts, Rodinia, Laurentia, and Valbara. Age of Dawn. From 0 years until 2,000 years after Shuttering, the world stabilized in its current state, and the new climate formed distinct ecosystems on Rodinia from north to south. Humans rose as the most adaptable race, so the human kingdoms flourished, while the Fey and exotic races secluded on the western shores and the southern reaches, as the dwarfs carved their halls under the mountain ranges. Though the progress of Teruvas on the arcane halted, others continued his ideas and the art became common. The gods continued their stance of neutrality, though they interfered from time to time. The continent did not face again catastrophic events of large magnitude, and most issues were dealt by commissions through the Adventurers Guild, the Three Little Pigs, while the magistrates supervised the use of magic and the Emerald Enclave nurtured the pure traces of the old world. And what the future holds for this realm, who can tell?